Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to this class for English. I'm Anurita, and we shall continue with the poem Birches. And this one is part 2. Right, so let us continue from where we left it. We left it, the last line, I'll read it out. You'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. We'll continue from there. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. Now let's pay attention to the word they. They over here refers to the birch trees. They refers to the birches or the birch trees. They are dragged to the withered bracken. Another word coming up for you is bracken. Bracken is a kind of fern. Generally in the woods, different kinds of vegetation covers the surface of the earth. But most of the time, near birch trees, you will find a variety of ferns growing, which is called bracken. एक किस्म किस्म की घासें उगती हैं, कुछ घास ferns की तरह भी उगते हैं. उन ferns को bracken कहा जाता है. They are dragged to the withered bracken. Withered, dying. Why dying? When trees die out, they are called to be withered. Why withered? In such extreme climate, where it is extremely cold, and there is snow and there is ice, nothing seems to survive. Most of the vegetation dies out. Even the trees lose their leaves, lose their flowers, lose any kind of fruit. The surface of the earth generally becomes barren as well, because most of the grass has died out. There are only very few varieties of grass that can grow in such extreme weather. Therefore, the birches are dragged to the dying fern bracken by the load. Load of what? Load of ice. Crystals. The load of ice crystals. And they seem not to break. They again refers to birches. The birches seem not to break. The trunks are flexible and therefore do not break. Rather, once they are bowed, once they are bent, एक दफे वो मुड़ जाते हैं for a very long time, for long, for a long period of time, they never right themselves. Right themselves, straighten up. They never straighten up. They remain curved or bent. You may see their trunks arching in the woods. The illustration that we saw right in the beginning of the poem shows it very clearly that the branch can be seen forming an arch. The branch is still alive. The birch can be seen arching. The tree is still alive. It's not being forced down. But the shape that it has now taken up is very bent and curved. You may see their trunks arching in the woods. Arching again, curving in the woods, years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground. And when spring and summer comes, they grow their leaves back. But this time, their leaves grow on them even as the trunks remain arched. Years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground. And let us pay attention here, because suppose this is the surface of the forest and these are the tree trunks. What's happening? Because the leaves are growing now, the tree is so low bent that its leaves are now touching the ground. They seem to be trailing on the ground. Years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground. Like what? Like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. Exactly like those girls who would wash their hair probably and then go out in the fields and throw their hair in front of their faces so that their hair could dry. But these girls are not standing. They are down on their hands and their knees. Like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them, over their faces. Before them refers to over their faces, to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in. But I was going to say, when truth broke in. Please pay attention that truth has been written with a capital T. Pay attention to the truth with a capital T. Truth over here has been personified. What is the poet trying to say? The poet is trying to say that he was trying to talk about some other cause when reasoning, matter-of-factliness, and truth broke his line of thought and intervened, telling everybody about the ice, the snow, the breeze, and all these things. Whereas he was trying to draw our attention towards what he would have preferred. And what would he have preferred? Let's read. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows. You don't need to get confused. Let me try to help you here. शुरू में जब ये पोएम कि शुरू की लाइनों में आप देखेंगे कि रॉबर्ट फ्रॉस्ट ने एक लड़के की बात की. वो कहता है, I'd like to think some boys been swinging them. उसके बाद कहता है, but swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. He likes to think that most of the curves formed in the tree trunks are due to swinging by boys. However, his logic and reasoning forces him to tell us all about the ice storms and all about the rain and all about the ice melting and breaking down with shattering sound upon the earth. So, matter of fact, truth takes over. But now, he wants to go back to what he prefers would have been the truth. And what, according to him, would have been a better thing? I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows. This is what he wants, rather than what he had told you earlier. And what he told you earlier was actually the real reason, but in his imagination, this would have been a better reason. I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from the town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. These lines are comparatively very simple. His mind goes out to his childhood days when most of the time he had to invent games and entertainment for himself, just like many other boys living in the rural countryside. Because city boys and children who live in the city area have many facilities like baseball, like football, like basketball, like table tennis. But boys who grew up in the countryside had to invent a lot of games, and swinging on birches was one game he thoroughly enjoyed as a child. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, what he invented for himself. What he invented for himself. Summer or winter, whether it was summer or whether it was winter, it didn't matter. The boy could play alone. And could play alone means the boy or boys could play them by themselves and did not need too many things or too many people. One by one he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again. Subdued his father's trees. Please pay attention here. What is he trying to tell you? As a boy, it is very evident that Robert Frost was brought up in the rural parts of New England, America. Being brought up in the agricultural lands of America, farmers had big tracts of lands. Not all tracts of lands were cultivated. Many were left to grow as woods. Many were left to grow into forests. And these are the parts that brought most of the fun. So his father also had a lot of patches where loads of birch trees would grow. And one by one, he subdued his father's trees. What do we understand by subdued? To subdue means to tame. To subdue means to conquer. As a birch swinger, our friend Robert Frost also ensured that each tree that grew on his father's patch of land was conquered by him. And how did he conquer it with? He did not conquer it with swords. He did not conquer it with guns, but he conquered them by climbing to their tops and then coming back to earth, swinging on them. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again. Over and over again, one word. Repeatedly. Repeatedly. Right? Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again. In one word, repeatedly. Until he took the stiffness out of them. How much would he do it repeatedly? How he enjoyed himself thoroughly, doing it again and again and again, and ensuring that all the trees, one by one, one by one, one by one, had been conquered and converted into his swing. Until he took the stiffness out of them. We must understand that he does not have a simple stick or wire in his hand. He is dealing with birches. The poet would love to imagine that all the trees that could be found and conquered by swinging were conquered, and also the stiffness was taken out of them till they could be bent. उनके ऊपर बराबर झूला झूलते रहने से, बराबर झूला झूलते रहने से, बराबर उनके ऊपर चढ़ के और उनके डालियों को पकड़ के झूलने से क्या? पेड़ों की स्टिफनेस निकल जाए, पेड़ों की स्टिफनेस फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी में बदल जाए. Till the time they would be bent and could become flexible. And not one but hung limb, not one was left to him to conquer. Not one was hung limp. Limp? Lifeless? Not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon. What do you mean by launching? Launching is to shoot off in the air. Launching, to shoot off in air, is to launch. Whenever a missile or a rocket is launched, what does happen? It takes off from the earth and goes straight high into the sky. That is what launch is. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon. As he goes about, swinging on each birch tree, he improves on his skill as a birch swinger. And as he improves in his skill of swinging on the birch trees, what happens? He learns everything, every nitty-gritty about doing it in the correct manner. And what are these nitty-gritties? He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon. Taking off into the air at the correct moment. और वो करेक्ट मोमेंट क्या होना चाहिए? By doing it repeatedly, he was able to understand. And so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. By launching out correctly into the air, what was he able to accomplish? He was not only able to accomplish the swinging part of it, but he was also able to ensure that the tree was not broken off, that the tree was not uprooted, or the branch did not break from and come crashing down on earth. And so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise. Poise, composure. Poise will be composure. And another word, balance. Composure and balance. He always kept his poise. Why did he need composure? He needed focus. If you're trying to do something which requires skill, which can be dangerous or which can be harmful to the tree, one would have to be very careful. In order to be careful, one would have to concentrate. In order to concentrate, one must have a calm mind. But the mind will not climb on the tree. The body will. So, he has to create a balance. He has to balance himself from the thick branches to the thinner branches on the top. So, he has to ensure there is perfect coordination of the mind and the body. And that is what he says. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully. Climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup. Fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. So the poet is trying to say the same kind of concentration, focus, poise and balance is required. Just the way one decides that I must fill a cup to the top and even a little over the rim, the upper rim of a cup, without dropping or spilling a single drop of water. Now that would require a lot of concentration. Suppose you decided that you wanted to make a palace out of cards, or you wanted to balance dominoes on each other. Balancing anything or balancing oneself in a delicate situation all requires mind and body coordination to its fullest. And that is what the boy learned. Up to the brim and even above the brim. And then what did he do? Once he was on the top branches, balancing himself very delicately and very gracefully, then he flung outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. And once he was on the topmost branches he could manage, he would catch hold of the branches tightly and fling his feet into the air, throw himself into the air freely, feeling liberated. Feet first with a swish. Swish over here refers to the force. The force of swing. The force of the swing. Kicking his way down through the air to the ground. Kicking and thrashing his feet about till the time the tree trunk bent and landed him back on earth. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. These are beautiful lines. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. Now we know how did he get these beautiful ideas about writing a poem on the birch trees, because as a child, he himself had done a lot of birch swinging, and the birch swinging experience gave him many, many more skills to learn. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. Well, along with skills, more importantly, it gave him a lot of joy, a lot of freedom. And so I dream of going back to be. And therefore, I myself want to go back and become something like that again. He wishes that he could do the same thing again. Now, with this, we come to the end of the second part of the poem, Birches. In the next session, we shall complete the poem. Thank you very much. Do well.